Hey guys, iOS Expert 649, and I'm going to be giving you my most educated guess on whether or not the iPhone 11 and 11 Pro series will get iOS 27 and some type of side effects that could indeed happen if this iPhone, if 11 Pro, 11 Pro Max, and the SE 2020, which is what I'm recording on, do not get iOS 27. I'm gonna be explaining some side effects and whether or not they will get this version. Basically, the first thing you need to know is that it's been kind of leaked that it wasn't getting update. There was this huge rumor that it wasn't getting the update. It was leaked by Simple Alpaca. It was leaked by Digital on Weibo. It leaked by a lot of people that this thing wasn't, that these phones were not getting the update. But basically, I'm gonna show you I'm gonna give you guys my educated guess on whether or not these phones will get the update. So first and foremost, we are gonna have to talk history. So we're gonna talk about the 3GS, which got iOS 6, whereas the 3G was stuck a few years ago. By this point, by the time the 3GS got iOS 6, the iPhone 3G was stuck on iOS 4, 0.2.1, not even 4.3.5. So then the 4 got iOS 7.1.2, and then after that, and then the 4S got iOS 9, which was an extra year over the 4, just like the 3G and 3GS. And then the iPhone 5 got iOS 10, so that's the same lifespan. And then the iPhone 5S got iOS 11, which was buggy. Then iPhone 5S got iOS 12 update. And then the iPhone 6 also ended off on iOS 12. So if we actually look at the older performance there, that would, if we keep going, under the old definition, the iPhone 6 would have iOS 13, but we see under this new definition, the 6 is now stuck on iOS 12, just like the 5S. And what we are going to have is, I'm going to compare it now, we're going to start comparing the old definition versus the current definition. So that's the difference there. 13, now if we look at iOS 13, if we keep following the old definition, the iPhone 6 gets iOS 13, but obviously the current definition did not get iOS 13 back in 2019, and then basically the 6S, now both of these definitions agree that they'll get iOS 15. So if the 6 had gotten iOS 13, iOS 15 would have been an extra version over iOS 13 that the 6S got that the 6 did not got. So both 14 and 15, the 6S would have gotten under the old definition. Under the current definition, 13, 14, and 15, none of them, or all three of them, are support on the 6S, but not the 6. And this is where things start getting a little bit weird, as the iPhone 7, after iOS 15, was cut off at the same time as the iPhone, 6S. So if we keep following, so again, under the old rule, like the legacy rule, the iPhone 7 would have gotten iOS 16 because it's not an S model. With the iPhone 6 gotten iOS 13, the 7 would have gotten iOS 16. And and then I seem, where I might not gone with this. Basically, the iPhone 8 gets iOS 16, under a new definition, but under the old one, the 8 would have gone iOS 17, and I think you might know where I'm going with this. I think you might just know where I'm going with this. Because the iPhone 6S and 6S Plus, both definitions agree, the iOS 16, iOS 17, iOS 18 definition, the XR, also got 18 but not 17. Although under the old definition, because the XR is an S model with the XS model, right? That means that phone would have gotten, iOS 26 instead of iOS. Had the A gotten iOS, had the iPhone A and iPhone X got iOS, 16, iOS 17, that means if you add that extra year on to the iPhone XR and XS phones, you have iOS. You wouldn't have iOS 18 anymore, because the iPhone 7 would have gotten iOS 16, and the S model, and then the XS and XR, another S model. So that gets you up to, and that gives you iOS 18 under the new definition, but under the old definition, that would have actually given you iOS 26. But here's the catch. During those versions, right, iOS 16, iOS 17, iOS 18, older iPads were actually supported than iPhones. So basically the iPad 9 has iOS, or not the iPad 9, sorry, the iPad 5 with the A9 chip, the iPad 5, the iPad 5, as well as I think the 9.7-inch iPad Pro and the first gen 2015 iPad Pro. Those all have the A9 chip, but they got iOS 16. But the 7 had the A10 chip, the 7 series, so the iPhone 7, 7 Plus, iPod Touch 6, the 7th generation device with the A10 chip, just got stuck at iOS 15, while the A9 iPad got iOS 16. And then obviously after that, it was the A10 and the A11. With iOS 17, the iPhone 8 did not get iOS 17, but the A10 iPad did. And then, we had and then obviously there was no A11 iPad, so the 7th gen iPad would proceed to get iOS 18 on the A10 chip, whereas the minimum required chipset for the iPhone was A12, so A11 was stuck at iOS 16. That A10 iPad actually got iOS 17, and one of them even got iOS 18. And that is where you get to iOS 26 and that is where you actually get down to iOS 26, because we see that the new iPads, or not the new, under this brand new definition, the iPhone XR is not supported no more. So, basically, where I'm going with this is that if Apple does do this, then, if Apple does Apple could continue doing that, and then if Apple continues doing what they did with iOS 16, iOS 17, then that means the iPad mini 5 and iPad 8 would actually get this update. Now, where am I going with this? Well, under this new definition, there is a chance, because you can't really, the 8 on iOS 16 was stuck at 16, and then the XR and XS being an X model, but the iPhone 11, if the iPhone 11 were to get iOS 27, it would be a bug fix update. So yeah, it would be a bug fix update, and that, there for you go, that, the iPad 8, so basically, if I had to guess, at the top of my head, I do believe every iPad, based on history and current behavior, there was no A11 iPad that was getting dropped. So if I had to guess, I would say that the iPhone 11 is 50-50, but the iPad 8 and iPad mini 5 might actually have a good chance of getting iOS 27, because, the iPad 5 got iOS 16, the iPad 5 got iOS 16, as well as the first-gen iPad Pro and the 9.7-inch flavor iPad Pro, all with the A9 chip, while the iPhone 7 did not. So incidents like that, or the iPad 6 has the A10 chip, which got iOS 17, but not the iPhone 8. And then, in fact, the iPad Mini 5 and iPad Air 3 might actually end up getting iOS 28 as well, Even, I know these iPads are from, technically speaking, from another decade, if we're technical to the point, but if we call those iPads from another decade, then Windows 98 would be from a whole other millennium. So I'm not even gonna say that, but I'm just gonna talk to modern day, basically the iPad Mini 5 would get iOS 27 and might actually get iOS 28. I know that's a stretch, but yeah, the iPhone 11, that's 50-50 given the behavior. I actually think given Apple's behavior, the iPhone 11 is 50-50, but I heard rumors about the Intel Max getting dropped. I heard rumors about the Intel Max getting dropped, and I heard rumors about the iPhone 11 getting dropped. I never heard rumors about the iPad Mini 5, iPad Air 3, or any other iPads being dropped. I haven't seen that many aggressive rumors, so but if you look at oldish modern behavior, iOS 16, iOS 17, and even iOS 18 with the iPad 7, that's your clue that the iPad Mini 5 and iPad 8 might actually get iOS 27. Yeah, the 11 is 50-50. Same thing with the iPhone SE second generation. Those might all be 50-50, but those might all be 50-50 as the iPad. There was the thing here, what I'm trying to get at is there was never an A11 iPad, and the A11 is the chip for those older people that don't know that the iPhone 8 actually had the A11 chip. The iPhone 11 actually has the A13 Bionic chip. Meanwhile, the iPad Mini 5, iPad Air 3, and iPad 8 and some other iPad Pros actually have so yeah, based on my opinion, Apple also said this new update, iOS 27, makes all systems glow. Whether or not we're going to see the iPhone 11 glow as well, because it's not an Intel Mac, I feel like basically my opinion is that an Intel Mac, so a 2020 iMac, the 2019 MacBook, and the 2019 Mac Pro, I feel like those are going to get dropped on 26. I think that's for sure, that the 2020 iMac, Intel Mac computer, so if you have a 2019 MacBook, a 2020 iMac, or a 2019 Mac Pro, I feel like those are on the most likely verge of getting dropped, because we're already seeing warnings about macOS 28 on when you try open apps like sideloadly on a Silicon Mac. So just like the iPhone 5 was on iOS 10, just like the iPhone 5 was on iOS 10, when we saw warnings about that on 10.3, when they started using a whole new file system and stuff like that. iOS 28, or macOS 28, excuse me, we'll see a new, we'll probably see a new file system, and Apple will almost certainly cut Intel Macs. So what this means for you, if you have a 2019 MacBook, a 2020 iMac, or a 2019 Mac Pro Tower, what this means for you is you will get security updates, but instead of getting any features or bug fixes, you're just going to get security only updates on your Mac Pro or on your older Mac computer. My aunt actually intended to buy a 2020 M1 MacBook, and what she got was a 2020 Intel MacBook. Now that one, I believe, is unclear whether or not that will get macOS 27. If she got the original M1 chip, then I would say, yeah, absolutely, you might actually get macOS 28. But now that she has gotten ripped off with a 2020 Intel Mac, now that my aunt has gotten ripped off with a 2020 Intel Mac, that one, I think, the 2020 Intel MacBook Pros, I mean, they're somewhat modern, my aunt uses one every day. I think that one's unclear, I would put it very similar to the iPhone 11. I would make it very similar to the iPhone 11. 2020 Intel MacBook, I don't know. It might, And that's the thing. If you take a look at the but I'm pretty much think that for sure. But I'm pretty much thinking that for sure the 2020 iMac, the 2019 MacBook, and the Mac Pro Tower, which is also from 2019. I feel like that those are the ones that are for sure going to get dropped. And then you look at iOS and iPadOS. I think that there isn't really any devices that are for sure going to get cut off. Like, I feel like the 11 and 11 Pros and the 11 Pro Maxes and this SE second generation, those I think are unclear because given Apple's behavior with the iPhone 6s, 5s, and 6, that points to the 11 getting the update. But the iPads points to the iPad Mini 5 and iPad 8 still getting the update, but not the iPhone 11. So I feel like the iPhone 11 and 2020 Intel MacBook computers are unclear. And if you have an iPad, and good news for you, if you have it, if your device is an iPad, I have one question for you. Does your iPad run iOS 26? If yes, congratulations, you're going to get iOS 27. You're going to get all the bug fixes. And I can say that with confidence. The iPad 9th generation, the iPad Mini 5, Apple has historically, ever since iOS 16, they've been supporting iPads with weaker chips. And they still do it today. The iPhone 11 has the A13 chip. So is the SE2 from 2020. And then the iPad Mini 5, iPad 8, iPad Air 3, and the iPad Pros. The older iPad Pros, those have the A12X and A12Z and even regular A12 chips. So if you have one of those, if you have an iPad, it's good news for you if you have an iPad. If you have an iPad that runs iPadOS 27, good news. Every iPad that runs 26 runs 27. Congratulations, your iPad that runs iOS 26, even if it's the oldest one, should be getting iPadOS 27. I could say that with confidence. You do not need this video now. But everybody else, if you have an iPhone or a MacBook, stay here because I think the iPhone 11 is going to be, that's where it's like unclear. You know, the iPhone 11 Pro Max, and 11 Pros and SE 2020. That's unclear to me. It may or may not. I mean, the iPhone 8 is stuck on iOS 20, or not 26, 16. That's the tongue twister for me because they both end with 6. But even though the iPhone 8 should have gotten iOS 17, in my opinion, it could have handled iOS 17 given the iPad, but it got iOS 16 only. So Simple Alpec, I know, was furious about that. So basically that is why the iPhone 11 is unclear. You know, some patterns think it's going to be supported, some patterns think it's not going to be supported. The rumors actually very likely think that it's not going to be supported. But before you click off this video and say it's unlikely, buzz off with your nonsense. No, I'm talking real stuff. The iPhone, these are rumors, okay? It is a rumor at the moment. You know, Apple has not announced it, whether it will all be supported or not, but whether or not it'll be supported or not, we'll have to see, and we're going to see in 4 days whether or not it'll be supported or not. But I say that and so if you have a MacBook, now before I finish with this, if you have a MacBook, I have to first off say this isn't a huge issue if you have a MacBook because if you have a Mac computer, because it's just the older Macs, you know, 2019 MacBook Pros, I think the 2020 iMac and the 2019 Mac Pro, those are for sure not going to get support. And then the 2020 MacBook Pro Intel, that is unclear, just like the 11, and then all M1 Macs are for sure going to get the update. So anyways, iPhone users, this is where we need to pay attention. If you're on any iPhone, by the way, this next piece of information I'm about to share with you actually applies to any iPhone that is not the 17E or iPhone 17 Air. So most iPhones that are out right now. So yeah, any iPhone. Now the next piece of information I'm about to share with you applies to any iPhone. With either the Intel chip, because the iPhone 11, 11 Pro Max, and SE 2020 have the Intel chip, so or have the Intel baseband, whereas the iPhone 12 series and upstream with the iPhone 12, they use this Qualcomm Snapdragon chip, which has faulty firmware that expects a date. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if you have an iPhone 11, if the iPhone 11 if you ever heard of if you know how programming works, if you know computer programming or how to program iOS or macOS, you'll know that you can run 64-bit or devices on 32-bit mode on like Windows and stuff like that, but you cannot do vice versa as easily. It requires way more clever work, and it's probably going to be easier for Apple to just support the iPhone 11 than to just fix this bug in a clever way that I'm about to show you. And this is the programming technique. And if Apple ends up going the lazy route, then this is where you have to be cautious. Only install iOS 27 on your iPad if this ends up being the case, because only install iOS 27. Repeat after me. Don't get excited. Repeat after. If you want your phone to work, and you don't want to take your phone to the Apple Store, repeat after me. If the iPhone 11 with the Intel chip does not get this update, then the date I'm about to show you will really screw up your device, because the Qualcomm Snapdragon chip would be doing the baseband stuff on its own, and therefore it can really cause a huge problem for you if on iOS 27, if this ends up being the case. And I'm being very clear about this. Repeat after me. If Apple lifts the cap on 2069, regardless of this warning, then there's going to be a problem on any iPhone with the Qualcomm Snapdragon chip, and then obviously minus the 11, which has the Intel chip. That leaves you to just the 17E and 17 Air that are immune to this bug. So, as well as the 18s in the fall. So that's most iPhones. Okay, this is most iPhones that would run iOS 27. So most iPhones. What if I were to tell you, because of this bug, most iPhones can actually run iOS 27 are going to experience this in a slightly different way than being dropped. Just for one reason or another, because Apple is sitting back on their butts, letting this stuff implode, and I'm here to make sure that you guys know how to avoid this from imploding. So the first thing is, if the iPhone 11 is dropped support, you have to wait until September to install iOS 27. Repeat after me. Do not install the beta, or this bug will brick your device. I am running 26.0.1 on my iPhone SE 2020. I'm just going to show you I'm using this phone because it probably this is going to give you a good idea of what it would look like if it weren't capped. So if the date wasn't capped, if the iPhone 11 were not getting iOS 27 or the SE 2020, this is how a broken iPhone SE third generation would actually look like. If if you installed iOS 27 on it and you set it to this date. So what you do is you turn off set automatically, and basically, and if you set the date very far in the future, you'll know that on modern versions of iOS 26, starting with 26.1, you'll probably know that this doesn't go past 2069. Well, because I'm on 26.0.1, I can go past 2069, and I can go all the way forward, as you can see. And so where I'm trying to go with this is if you install iOS 27 on Qualcomm only devices, okay, if you install iOS 27 on Qualcomm only devices and you do this, this is what's going to happen. Your device is going to look like it behaves normally, right? Your phone is going to behave normally, but as you saw there, my phone has 19% left, and that's what I got the warning about. What I'm warning you about, though, is once this update, if you do go ahead and do this, so, yeah, what I'm trying to say is do not install iOS 27 and do this if the 11 is dropped, because as the Intel chip, it's very similar, like the C-series modems are newer technology, the Intel baseband is older technology, obviously the full version of 27, I do fully trust in Apple that they'll have it merged by then. So basically, if the iPhone 11 is dropped, you must wait until 26.0.1. And if you do, yeah, and where I'm trying to go with this is if you do install iOS 27 beta, what I'm trying to say is if you do install iOS 27 beta and you do this, your device will become really, really badly screwed up. Now, on iPads, you don't really have to worry about, there was, even on 26 beta 1, the iPad was calm about this. But, yeah, even though the iPad was, calm about, the iPad on iOS 26, even iOS 26 beta was calm about this, the fact that the thing with the iPad is, the reason why iPads are safe is because the iPad 5th generation, or 8th generation, the iPad Mini 5, and the iPad 8th generation, the Air 3, as well as some other iPads, like the Pros and stuff that have the A12 chip, those have a high likelihood of getting updated, and even if they don't get updated, the iPads will most likely be fine, as iPads have always been calm about this bug. But if you have an iPhone, be careful about the list. If the 11 is dropped, do not install 27 beta 1 and do this. It will really screw up your device. Yeah, it will really screw up your device and will really be bad. So, I repeat after me. I repeat, if your device is an iPhone with a Qualcomm Snapdragon chip and the 11 is dropped, do not install 27 beta 1 and do this. Okay? I repeat, do not install 27 beta 1 and do this. You know why? Because it will really badly screw up your device. And I'm just warning you about this. Wait until the full version with the iPhone 18. I would wait until 26.0.1 or 27.0.1 to get a patch for this before you actually install this update on a Qualcomm Snapdragon device, just to avoid problems. Alright guys, thank you for watching and peace out.